A young tech billionaire, haunted by his own success, meets a heartbroken 4-year-old girl. Her Christmas was cancelled, and her reason why sends a chill down his spine. Robots took my dad's job. In that moment, he realizes he isn't a hero of innovation. He's the architect of her family's pain. Have you ever wondered if the ripples from your past could one day grow into a wave that comes crashing back down on you? Tonight, I have a story that explores just that. A story about progress, unintended consequences, and a chance encounter that changed everything. Imagine a young tech billionaire, the genius who sold his automation company for a fortune. He meets a sad 4-year-old girl outside his old elementary school. "I didn't get a Christmas present," she tells him, "because the new robots took my daddy's job." He turns pale, because he's the one who built those robots. His name is Leo Vance. At 30, he was already a legend in Silicon Valley, a ghost in the machine who had cashed out and retreated into a life of quiet, empty luxury. He was back in his hometown of Pittsburgh for the first time in years, visiting his old school to make a large, anonymous donation, a hollow attempt to reconnect with a past he had long since outgrown. As he was leaving, he saw her, a little girl named Chloe, sitting alone on the cold stone steps, her shoulders slumped in a way that spoke of a burden too heavy for a child to carry. He almost kept walking, but something in her quiet sadness stopped him. "Are you okay?" he asked. Her answer wasn't a cry for help. It was a simple, heartbreaking statement of fact. She told him about her dad losing his job at the old steel mill, about the new machines that had taken his place. For her, it was the reason she didn't get a doll for Christmas. For Leo, her words were a sledgehammer. The code he had written in a gleaming California high-rise now had a face, and it was the face of this little girl, shivering in the cold Pennsylvania air. Before we find out what he does next, I want you to just take a moment with me. Whether you're watching this in the middle of a busy day or late at night, I'm grateful you're here. If you've ever had a chance encounter that made you rethink everything, let me know by tapping that like button. The multi-million-dollar check he'd just donated suddenly felt like an insult. He was the celebrated innovator, the face of progress, but in this little girl's story, he was the villain. Leo drove away from the school in a daze, the sleek, silent hum of his electric car, a stark contrast to the clanging machinery of his own memories. Chloe's story hadn't just shocked him. It had unlocked a part of himself he had spent a decade trying to escape. He wasn't just a billionaire from Pittsburgh. He was the son of a steelworker. He remembered his own childhood in a small row house just a few miles from where he now sat, the air thick with the smell of the mills. He remembered the constant, low-grade anxiety that settled over their home whenever there were whispers of layoffs. He remembered a Christmas when he was 7, and the only gift under their sparse tree was a second-hand model airplane kit. He recalled the look on his father's face, a mixture of pride and quiet shame, as he tried to explain that Santa was on a budget that year. He remembered his parents whispering about bills at the kitchen table, thinking he was asleep, their voices heavy with a worry that seeped through the walls. Chloe's story wasn't just a story. It was a ghost. It was his own past, staring back at him. The bitter irony was crushing. He had escaped that life of uncertainty by creating a future of ruthless efficiency, a future that was now creating the same uncertainty for families, just like his own. He hadn't just built an algorithm. He had built a machine that duplicated the very pain he had dedicated his life to outrunning. It's funny how a stranger's story can suddenly feel like your own, unlocking memories you thought were long buried. Our past is always with us, isn't it? I'm curious, and you don't have to share details, but if a memory from your own childhood has ever helped you understand someone else's struggle? Just type the word "connect" in the comments below. Let's see how many of us share that experience. Back in his sterile, minimalist hotel suite, Leo looked at his own hands, the hands that had written the code, and felt the weight of a debt he never knew he owed. He couldn't just write another check. He had to do something more. Leo knew he couldn't undo the damage his company had caused with a single check. This required something more personal. His mission became simple, almost primal. He needed to fix Chloe's Christmas. He bypassed the large, impersonal toy stores, searching instead for something with a soul. He found it in a small, dusty, family-owned shop in Pittsburgh's Strip District, a place that smelled of old wood and new paint. There, he found a beautiful, handcrafted doll with yarn hair the same color as Chloe's, and brave, embroidered blue eyes. It was a toy from a world before automation, made with care and patience. He went back to the school the next day and found Chloe on the same steps. He knelt down beside her. "I have a weird story to tell you," he began. "I have a friend who works at the North Pole, and he told me there was a mix-up. A very special, very important gift got put on the wrong sleigh." Chloe's eyes widened. With all the seriousness he could muster, Leo presented her with the box. The gasp she let out when she saw the doll was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. It wasn't just about the gift itself, it was the proof. Proof that she hadn't been forgotten. Proof that Santa didn't just care about the rich kids. She hugged the doll. Then, in a move that shattered Leo's remaining composure, she threw her arms around his legs and hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered into his expensive trousers. "Thank you for telling Santa where to find me." He looked down at this little girl, whose world he had accidentally broken and was now trying to piece back together, one small act of kindness at a time. A friendship had just been forged, not on a playground, but on the steps of an old brick school, built on the shared hope that it's never too late to make things right. Their friendship blossomed over the next few weeks, a strange and beautiful thing built on shared secrets and playground conversations. But Leo knew it was built on a lie of omission. The inevitable finally happened when Chloe invited him over for dinner. "Mommy makes the best spaghetti," she had said, and he couldn't say no. Walking up to their small, rented house, he felt a terror he hadn't experienced even when risking billions on a startup. The house was humble. The furniture was worn. But the air was thick with a warmth his mansion had never known. Family photos covered the walls. Chloe's drawings were taped to the refrigerator. He met her parents, David and Maria, hard-working people with kind eyes and weary smiles. They greeted him as a hero, the benevolent stranger who had brought joy back into their daughter's life. They had no idea he was the ghost responsible for their hardship. Over dinner, David spoke about his life. He talked about his 20 years at the steel mill, the pride he took in his work, and the shock of being replaced by a software update. He didn't speak with anger, but with a deep, profound sadness. "They say it's progress," David said, looking at his own calloused hands. "But it doesn't feel like progress when you can't provide for your family." Every word was a dagger in Leo's heart. He was sitting at their table, eating their food, being praised as a saint by the very man his success had broken. Can you imagine sitting in that room, being praised as a hero by the very people your success has hurt? It's a heavy, heavy secret. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to carry a difficult truth? You don't need to say what it was, but if you know that feeling, just type "I know" in the comments. It's a burden a lot of us have carried at some point. As Leo left their home that night, the weight of his secret was crushing. He knew he couldn't build a real friendship on this foundation of deceit. He had to tell them the truth, even if it meant losing the only real connection he had ever found. He couldn't let the lie continue. The next evening, Leo returned to their house, the weight of his confession heavy in his chest. He sat David and Maria down in their small living room, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Chloe was in her room, playing with the doll he'd given her. "There's something you need to know," he began, his voice strained. "The automation software that led to the mill's closure. I created it. The company that bought the land. It was my deal." He watched as their faces shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to a cold, quiet fury. David stood up, his fists clenched, the betrayal in his eyes a physical blow. "So, what was this?" he asked, his voice shaking with rage. "Some kind of guilt trip? You destroy our lives and then show up with a doll to make yourself feel better?" Just as the anger in the room was about to boil over, Chloe appeared in the doorway. She saw her father's rage and Leo's pained expression. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the hurt. She walked over and, without a word, took Leo's hand. That simple act of trust changed everything. "I can't undo what I did," Leo said, looking at David but speaking to the whole family. "But I can try to build something new." He pulled out his phone and, in front of them, canceled the multi-million-dollar data center project. "The factory is yours," he said. "I'll provide the capital and the technology. We can reopen it, not as a relic of the past, but as something new. A high-tech, worker-owned cooperative, a place where you are the owners, not the employees." The proposal was insane, a radical act of corporate atonement. David and Maria stared at him, their anger momentarily eclipsed by sheer shock. Leo had just confessed to being the villain of their story, and in the next breath, he was offering them a chance to write a new one together. Trust, once broken, is the hardest thing in the world to rebuild. Leo's offer wasn't met with gratitude. It was met with a wall of cold, hard suspicion. For David, the betrayal was deeply personal. This man, this tech world titan, had not only taken his job, but had also worked his way into his daughter's heart under false pretenses. His first instinct was to throw Leo out and never look back, but then he saw the foreclosure notices piling up on his neighbors' doors. He heard the quiet desperation in the voices of his former co-workers, and he saw the unwavering faith in his own daughter's eyes. He agreed to one meeting. They gathered in the dusty basement of the local union hall, a room filled with the ghosts of a dying industry. The air was thick with anger and despair. Leo stood before them, not as a billionaire, but as the son of a steelworker, and he did the one thing they never expected. He took full responsibility. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he said, his voice steady despite the hostile glares. "I only ask for a chance to help you build something that can never be taken away from you again. A company where you are the bosses." The men and women in that room, people who had spent their lives building things for others, were skeptical. They yelled, they accused. It was David who finally silenced the room. "I don't trust him either," he said, his voice raw. "But he's right about one thing. We were thrown away. This is a chance, maybe the only one we'll get, to build something for ourselves." It wasn't a moment of celebration. It was a grim, reluctant truce, an alliance forged in the ashes of their former lives. The work of rebuilding was about to begin, but the foundation was pure, fragile hope. Just as the first shoots of hope began to break through the cynical soil of Pittsburgh, a new shadow fell over their project. His name was Marcus Thorne, Leo's ruthless former business partner, a man Leo had pushed out of his first company for his unethical practices. Marcus had watched Leo's rise with bitter envy, and now he saw Leo's attempt at redemption as a personal insult and a financial opportunity. The attack was two-pronged and vicious. Publicly, Marcus appeared on financial news networks, a polished predator in a $1,000 suit. Leo Vance's community project is an economic fantasy, he'd say with a concerned frown. It's a vanity project funded by guilt. When it inevitably fails, it's these poor workers who will be devastated for a second time. He wasn't just predicting failure, he was engineering it. Privately, his corporate empire began to squeeze their fragile co-op. A crucial shipment of raw steel was mysteriously delayed. A custom-built piece of machinery arrived with a critical flaw. Small, deniable acts of sabotage designed to bleed them dry and make his public predictions a self-fulfilling prophecy. The poison began to work. The initial optimism within the community started to curdle into doubt and frustration. The workers started arguing. David found himself struggling to keep their spirits up. Leo was fighting a ghost, an enemy who was dismantling their dream from the shadows. There's nothing worse than having someone actively working against you, trying to tear down what you're trying to build. It can make you doubt everything. If you've ever had to deal with a hater, a rival, or just a negative force trying to dim your light, just hit the like button. You're not alone in that fight. Leo realized this wasn't just a business problem. It was a battle for the soul of their community, waged by a man who believed that hope was just another commodity to be bought and sold. Marcus's strategy was as brilliant as it was cruel. He waited until the co-op was on its knees. With their funds dwindling and morale at an all-time low, he called a press conference. He didn't present himself as a corporate raider. He presented himself as a savior. With feigned sympathy, he announced a generous offer. He would buy the factory and its assets, saving it from bankruptcy, and immediately hire every single one of the laid-off workers for his new logistics hub. It was a devil's bargain, wrapped in the language of compassion. He offered them a steady paycheck, health benefits, and an end to the uncertainty. He offered them safety. The price was their dream. They would have to give up their ownership, their autonomy, and their hope of building something for themselves. They would go from being partners to being low-wage employees, working for the very man who had engineered their failure. The offer tore the community apart. They held a meeting in the Union Hall, and the room was a tinderbox of fear and anger. "A paycheck is a paycheck," one man yelled. "I've got a mortgage and 3 kids to feed." "I can't feed them with a dream," others shouted him down. "He's offering us golden handcuffs," David countered, his voice ringing with passion. "He wants to own us. Don't you see? This is the final nail in the coffin." Leo was there, but he remained silent. He had given them the tools, but he couldn't force them to believe. This had to be their choice. They stood at a crossroads, forced to decide between a difficult, uncertain future they could call their own and a comfortable, predictable one that belonged to their enemy. The vote would decide everything. The air in the Union Hall was thick with defeat. The arguments had gone in circles, and the exhausted faces in the crowd showed that the lure of Marcus's offer, the promise of a steady paycheck, was winning. David had made his plea, but it wasn't enough. Just as the vote was about to be called, a small figure slipped away from her mother's side and walked to the front of the room. It was Chloe. The hall fell silent. She wasn't tall enough to reach the microphone, so she just stood there, clutching the doll Leo had given her, and spoke in her small, clear voice. "My daddy was sad for a long time," she began, looking at the crowd of hardened steelworkers. "He was sad when the machines came. Our house was sad. But then he started building our new factory. and he started smiling again. She looked directly at her father. He comes home tired now, but it's a happy tired. He's proud. Then she turned her gaze to the rest of the room. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling just a little. "Please don't let the mean man take our happy away." Her simple words did what hours of adult debate could not. She cut through the fear and the pragmatism and reminded them of what was truly at stake. It wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. It was about pride. It was about coming home happy tired. An old welder in the back, a man who had been arguing loudest for the deal, slowly got to his feet. "The kid's right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. One by one, others stood with him. The vote was unanimous. They chose the uncertain, difficult dream. It's incredible, isn't it? How sometimes the simplest words from the purest heart can cut through all the noise and remind us of what truly matters. It makes you believe in the power of a single voice. Have you ever been inspired by someone you least expected? A child? A quiet colleague? A stranger? Let me know with a simple yes in the comments. They had made their choice. They were on the brink of ruin, but they were finally united. Hope is a powerful fuel, but it doesn't pay the bills. The co-op was united, but they were also just days away from bankruptcy. Their salvation and their ultimate test arrived in the form of a single make-or-break opportunity. A major aerospace company, intrigued by their story, offered them one contract for a complex, high-precision component. The catch: the deadline was impossibly tight, a timeline designed to see if they could actually deliver. If they succeeded, the resulting contract would save them. If they failed, they would lose everything. What followed was a beautiful, chaotic symphony of old-world grit and new-world innovation. The factory ran 24/7. David, a natural leader, organized the shifts, his voice a steady presence over the hum of machinery. Leo wasn't in some distant office. He was right there on the factory floor, a laptop balanced on a stack of steel plates, writing code on the fly to optimize the workflow. The whole community pitched in. Maria and other spouses organized a food train, keeping the workers fed. The line between management and labor, a line that had defined their entire lives, simply disappeared. They hit a wall just 48 hours before the deadline. A critical piece of automated machinery, a casualty of Marcus's earlier sabotage, failed. It seemed like the end. But then, something amazing happened. David and a team of veteran welders, using their decades of hands-on knowledge, jury-rigged a solution, merging an old-school technique with Leo's software to create a hybrid process that was actually faster than the original. In that moment of crisis, they didn't just save the project. They created something new, something that was uniquely theirs. They made the deadline with minutes to spare, their victory echoing through the entire industry and publicly humiliating Marcus Thorne, who had loudly predicted their demise. Their victory wasn't just a single contract, it was a shockwave. The story of Steel Valley rebirth went from a local curiosity to a national phenomenon. Business schools from Harvard to Stanford sent students to study their hybrid model. Delegations from other forgotten factory towns across the Rust Belt came to learn how they had managed to turn the tide. They weren't just a co-op anymore. They were a symbol of a new American dream, one built on community and shared success, not just corporate profit. And Marcus Thorne? His empire, built on cynicism, crumbled under the weight of their hope. After the public humiliation of their success, his investors bailed, his board forced him out, and he became a cautionary tale in the very business journals where he had once been celebrated. He had gambled that people would always choose the easy paycheck over the difficult dream, and he had lost spectacularly. But the most profound change was in Leo. He sold his cold, empty mansion in California and bought a modest brick house just a few streets away from David and Maria's. He wasn't the billionaire benefactor anymore. He was a neighbor. He served on the co-op's advisory board, but his was just one voice among many. He spent his afternoons coaching Chloe's t-ball team and his evenings helping her with math homework. He had traded a life of infinite wealth for a life of infinite meaning. He found his purpose not in a boardroom overlooking a city skyline, but at a community picnic on the factory lawn, flipping burgers next to David, surrounded by the laughter of the very people he had once unknowingly displaced. He had finally, truly, come home. Months later, on a warm Sunday afternoon in Pittsburgh, Leo sat on the porch of his new brick house. He was in a comfortable, lived-in neighborhood, playing a game of cards with David, while Maria brought out a pitcher of lemonade. In the backyard, Chloe was trying to teach her doll, Luna, how to swing. This wasn't the empty luxury of a billionaire anymore. It was the simple, profound richness of a family. "Uncle Leo, can you push me higher?" Chloe yelled. And the name Uncle Leo, spoken so naturally, defined his new role. He wasn't just a benefactor or a friend. He was family, a title he had earned not with his money, but with his time, his heart, and his commitment. He looked out at this life he was now a part of. He had spent the first half of his life building an empire to escape his past, only to realize his true purpose was to use his resources to rebuild that very past for others. Redemption, he learned, wasn't about erasing your mistakes. It was about using your power to make things right. Their story is a powerful reminder that our greatest innovations shouldn't be measured in profits, but in the lives they improve. It's a story of resilience and proof that it's never too late to rewrite your own legacy. If you believe that one person's choice can spark a new beginning for an entire community, then make sure you subscribe and join us. Because stories of hope are the ones most worth sharing. Thanks for watching. Go out there and build something that matters.